The Stalwart light machine gun, in my opinion, should not be a special weapon. This should be a primary weapon. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Stalwart light machine gun in Helldivers 2, and we're going to be going over the stats, what it's strong for, and why I don't think it should be a special weapon, but instead a primary weapon. This was actually a primary weapon in the very first Helldivers game, and I think it would honestly fit that role a lot better in Helldivers 2 as well. Maybe that'll be changed in the future. Maybe we'll get one of these in one of the war bonds later in the future. We'll have to see. But for right now, let's talk about the Stalwart light machine gun. The Stalwart light machine gun is the second light machine gun that you can get right behind the MG43, which is the machine gun that you start out with in the tutorial, and you don't have to pay for it. You will have to pay for the Stalwart light machine gun stratagem. This one does low damage per shot, which is okay because it does have a high rate of fire and a large magazine size. This one is best used for crowd control, as you would kind of expect a light machine gun to be used for. This has a capacity of 250 rounds in it, and this comes with 3 magazines, including a 4th one that is already loaded into the gun, so you have 1,000 rounds in total, which does make it so you have quite a lot of bullets. However, it's not necessarily the most amount of bullets and the most amount of damage for small crowds that you can get, since both the laser rifles can kind of get more than this, and something like the Breaker Spray and Pray can also do a similar job with about the same amount of rounds. That one's less consistent because it is a shotgun, but it can do similar work to the Stalwart light machine gun, which are some of the major reasons why I don't think that this should be a special weapon and instead should just be a primary weapon, since even something like the laser rifles can kind of outdamage it, and technically always outdamage it because they sort of have infinite ammo, so that helps them quite a bit. So I think making this into a primary weapon and taking away maybe one of its magazines wouldn't really be all that crazy of an option to add into the game. I don't think it would necessarily be overpowered or maybe even one of the top tier picks, although basically everything in Helldivers is quite viable, not necessarily on every type of mission, but overall quite viable. The Stalwart has very low recoil, even when hip fired or shoulder fired. It's pretty easy to control this. That does depend on what rate of fire mode you have it set on. On the highest one, it can be a little bit more uncontrollable, but if you're crouching, or especially if you're prone, even on the highest rate of fire, this one is extremely controllable for you to use. The rate of fire you can switch. In order to do this, simply hold your reload button, and then you can select what rate of fire that you would like to have. This is right-click on mouse or D-pad arrows, so you can switch between this. This one has 700 rate of fire, 850 rate of fire, or 1150 rate of fire. So the 1150 rate of fire does make it hard to control if you're hip firing this or shoulder firing it to some extent. At close range, it shouldn't be a big deal. The longer ranges, maybe. If you're laying prone, not such a big deal. And if you're at the 700 rounds per minute, it's very easy to hip fire this or shoulder fire it. Same with the 850. I usually just keep it on 850, and that works just fine for me. This has the same cooldown as most of the weapon stratagems at 480 seconds, so that's 8 minutes. That is quite a while, and I wish the Stalwart was a little bit less than that. That would make it stand out a little bit more, because this weapon, I don't think it should really be a special weapon. I would much rather prefer it as a primary weapon, but if it is going to be a special weapon, I wish that the cooldown was quite a bit less. Maybe keep it at 4 minutes or something, or even 6 minutes or something like that. Just give it something a little bit more than some of the other weapons that you can call down, so it might be a more tempting option. That way at least you can always have it ready and always have ammo for it. That's not saying that it's super difficult to get ammo in Helldivers, but there are some missions where you just want to run from objective to objective. That way you can just clear up the mission a little bit faster, or clear up some of the bug tunnels a little bit quicker. And having a weapon that you can constantly call in does help with that quite a bit. And this has a call in of 3 seconds, so it comes in pretty fast, and of course you can use the actual stratagem itself as a weapon, so if you want to throw this on a charger and have it come down on top of it, that works perfectly fine too. Always remember that you can do that. That can be really, really useful in certain situations. This one you unlock at level 2, and this one only costs 3,500 credits, so it's not very expensive. You're probably going to be able to get this one really early on. For the general pros of the Stalwart light machine gun, this one is really good at the run and gun playstyle, so if you like running and gunning, this one can be really good. It's really good against small enemies, specifically small crowds of enemies, so the small bugs it can be really good against. Medium bugs it can still work fairly well against, but you're going to have to target their weak spots, target their legs. That's okay. It doesn't kill them as fast as the MG34 that we've already talked about, but it's decent enough, and it's okay against the bots, at least small bots. Small bots you rip through really fast. Medium bots, not so much, and honestly, it's kind of dangerous to be using it against them, assuming you're not in a good position to where you can constantly take cover, because sometimes they'll just shoot rockets at you and just straight up kill you, and that can be kind of annoying. So medium bots, not so much. And this one has a really large magazine. You can also reload this while you're on the run, which is an advantage over the MG43, where you will have to stop, reload it, and that can make you more vulnerable than something like the Stalwart where you don't need to stop. You can just keep running. It's similar to like the grenade launcher where you can reload that while you're running. For the major cons of the Stalwart light machine gun though, this one is not very good against heavy enemies. It's okay against medium enemies, except for medium bots, it's not so good. Medium bugs, it's fine. Small bugs, small bots, really good. Big enemies like the Chargers, the Bile Titans, Hulks, tanks, this one is not very good at fighting at all. The Hulks, you just have to hope that they're not paying attention to you and you can just keep shooting in the back. Same thing goes with the tanks, in which case they're probably focused on somebody else, in which case most weapons are fairly strong in that situation. Against Bile Titans, you basically do nothing to them. You can hit them in the body, and if you hit them on the body enough, you can kill them, but that kind of goes with any weapon. And same with Chargers, you're going to have to keep hitting them in the body and then eventually kill them or break their armor and then shoot the weak spots afterward, which the Stalwart can't break their armor naturally. So you're going to need something bigger to hit them with first, or somebody else to hit them first. And I guess the other con is that this is kind of slow against medium enemies. Medium bots specifically, medium bugs it's still okay, but it does take a little while to kill them. For a general build that I like running with the Stalwart, like primary, secondary weapon, I usually like taking the Slugger as my primary weapon. This gives me some armor penetration and it gives me some good range so that I can pick off certain medium armor targets a little bit easier or hurt big targets a little bit more. Then I'll take the submachine gun as my secondary weapon. The submachine gun just works really well as a secondary. Also, I don't really have many secondaries unlocked at the moment, and this one's just really good for spraying at close range, clearing up small bugs, clearing up small bots that are rushing me really fast. So that one's just useful in that regard. And then I'll have the Stalwart as my third weapon, my special weapon, and I'll just use this to mow down smaller enemies, specifically crowds of bugs. It can work again against small bots, but it works better against bugs and on those bug missions. For a general stratagem setup that I like taking with the Stalwart, first up we have to take the Stalwart because that's kind of necessary for this, unless you just plan on finding them on the ground, which, I mean, sometimes that does happen. Then I like taking something that can deal with big enemies, or at least harm big enemies a little bit quicker. The expendable anti-tank rounds are one of my absolute favorites, because they just come up so fast. You can always call them in. They do really high damage towards big enemies. You can take out basically everything with them. It takes out Hulks, it takes out Chargers, it can harm Bile Titans, it can harm tanks. Those ones are just really, really nice to have. And then I can use up those and then swap right back to my light machine gun. Not have to worry about even expending the expendable anti-tank rounds because they come up every minute, so that doesn't really matter. I'll always have them for most situations. Beyond that, I do like taking some of the heavy killing stratagems. So I'll take something like the orbital rail cannon. That one can be really useful because you can just drop it on top of a big enemy like a Charger and one-shot them, harm Bile Titans, harm tanks, kill Hulks outright, where otherwise this build kind of struggles against those. So that one's pretty nice. The 110mm rockets can be really good for taking out those enemies, assuming that they're actually hitting on target, because sometimes they go outside of where you want them to. Orbital laser is another really good one if you're going on bug missions to take out Chargers and Bile Titans. Can work decently well against like the Hulks and the tanks too, but I find it better against the bugs. But either way, it's a good option. And then of course, if you want to take turrets, those are always great too. Turrets are kind of mix and match and build whatever you would like to build. If you want more crowd control, you could go with like the machine gun and the Gatling turret. Those work really well. Or if you want more big target damage, you could go with like the auto cannon and maybe the rocket sentry or something like that. Those ones are also pretty good. You could of course go with like the stun mortar. I don't remember what it's called. I think it's the EMS mortar. That one can be pretty nice too, just so that you stun crowds of enemies. You can mow them down really easy with the Stalwart or get behind them and spray them really easy. So you do have plenty of options, and feel free to mix and match entirely in Helldivers, because that's what this game is all about, mixing and matching and having fun. For an overall rating on my tier list for the Stalwart light machine gun, against bugs, I would say this thing is probably B tier. It's pretty good against crowds, it can work decently well against medium bugs, it struggles against larger bugs, but that's okay if you take a primary or other weapons that can kind of deal with those big bugs, like the expendable anti-tank rounds, which are fantastic. Against bots, I would say that this thing's less. I would say this thing's like D tier for bots. It's good for clearing up small bots, and that's kind of about it. I don't like using it against medium bots, however, if I'm taking the Slugger, I'm just going to use that anyway for them. In which case then it's okay as well. But I wouldn't want to take this over like the MG43 for bots. I think it's better on those type of missions. You can clear up the walkers a little bit easier. You can actually kill Hulks and tanks fairly fast if they're not looking at you. Stalwart takes a little bit longer to do that. And I would rather take something like the anti-material rifle on those missions just to take out the Hulks really fast. Yeah, so I don't think it's that good on those type of missions, but bug missions can be really nice. Again, I do wish that this was a primary weapon, not a special weapon, because it kind of fills a similar role to like the laser rifles, where they're really good against crowds, really good against bugs particularly, and okay against bots. And same goes with like the breaker spray and pray, where it's really good against small bug hordes. but less useful against large enemies like a lot of the bots are. So I find it to be a decent stratagem overall. How do you find the Stalwart? Do you enjoy using it? Tell me that in the comments below. I'd love to hear that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.